I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of July 7th, 2020 of the Chino Valley Planning and Zoning Commission. Commissioner Welker, you're going to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we get a roll call, please?
Roll call. Going back to his concert days.
Commissioner Walker.
Here.
Commissioner McCafferty.
Here.
Commissioner Cassia.
Here.
Commissioner Schweitzer.
Here.
Commissioner Metters. Here. Vice Chair Armstrong.
Here.
Chair Merritt.
Here. Thank you. Can everybody hear me there with this thing stuck up in the air? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move forward to item 4A, consideration of possible action to approve the June 2nd, 2020 regular meeting minutes. Has the commission had an opportunity to study those out? Anybody, any questions, corrections, statements? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend we approve the June 2nd, 2020 minutes as drafted.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Moving on to item 5, staff reports. Okay, we're going to move forward to item 6A in the public hearing portion of the meeting. Request to approve the rezoning of approximately 10.54 acres of real property from the AR5 agricultural residential 5-acre minimum zoning district to SR 0.16 PAD single family residential 7,000 square foot minimum lot area zoning district with a planned area development overlay zoning district.
All right. Can everybody hear me? All righty. Good evening, Chair and Commission. There are 2 items before you tonight that pertain specifically to this property. The first is the requested zone change from AR5 to SR 0.16 PAD, and the second is the preliminary plat approval for the Wesdemar Farms subdivision. Staff felt that it was prudent to present both of these items together to avoid any sort of confusion or repetition. So generally located, the subject property is approximately 1,000 feet west of the intersection of West Road 2 South and South State Route 89. A couple of the surrounding residential developments include the Wagon Wheel Ranch subdivision, Chino Gardens subdivision, Bee Mountain Estate subdivision, and Parkside Village subdivision. Property description here. The subject property is outlined in blue, indicated with the dimensions of width and length. The lot size, approximately 10.54 acres. Existing zoning currently is AR5, agricultural residential, 5-acre minimum. General plan designation is medium density residential, and I'll hop into that a little bit more on the following slide. And the existing land use is currently vacant. Prior to its vacancy, it was a agricultural property. However, at the end of 2019, the applicant acquired a demo permit through the town and subsequently removed all structures on site. The town's general plan designates the subject property as medium density residential. This is also the same for the properties to the east and to the west of the subdivision. To the north and to the south, the general plan designates the area as multifamily commercial use. The subject property is also in close proximity to a potential community core located at the intersection of Road 1 South and State Route 89. As previously stated, the subject property is zoned AR5. To the practically surrounding it on the western side and north and south is agricultural residential, 5-acre minimum. To the east, you have the Chino Garden subdivision, which holds a zoning of SR1. You have the Wagon Wheel Ranch. They hold an SR1 zoning. You have Commercial Light abutting along 89. The Bee Mountain Estates is SR2 zoning, single-family residential, 2-acre minimum. And then you have the Parkside Village subdivision, which is multifamily residential and mobile home park zoning. The development to the east, the Chino Garden subdivision, is considered a non-conforming subdivision as their lot size dimensions do not meet the minimum required size dimensions as dictated through the SR1 zoning district. Primarily, all but 2 lots still hold the required 1-acre minimum. The other approximately 32 homes hold half-acre lot size.
I just want to make sure I understood you. So that development, is it called Chino? What was the name of that?
This one?
Yes.
Chino Gardens.
Chino Gardens is SR1, but the lots are all half acre. Is that what I understood?
That is correct.
Okay.
No problem. So touching base on the preliminary plat here, there's a total number of 15 proposed lots. The average lot size will be 21,796 square feet with a density of 1.2 or 1.5 density units or 1.5 homes to the acre. There's a designated area for open space of 0.77 acres. On the plat here itself, you can see that there is a 100-year floodplain that is impacting on this property here. It flows primarily south to north. So that is one of the impacting factors as far as the layout of this preliminary plat as well as the lot layouts. One of the small items to note on this preliminary plat here is the north arrow. The north arrow is referencing the vicinity map and not the actual site itself. The site, top of the page, is to the west, and north is to the right of the page. At the close of the presentation, I'll bring up a clearer image of the preliminary plat on screen to kind of facilitate discussion and questions. So this is just a couple of the proposed houses, that the developer is intending to construct here. We've got approximately 7 models. It'll obviously vary from kind of style, but the layout will be similarly as well as the characteristic. Part of the applicant's zoning request was for a planned area development. This mentioned standards and the setbacks along one lot line on lot 1. Town code asks for lots not to exceed a 3-to-1 ratio with the length ratio. The applicant has indicated that the proposed lot layout of exceeding this ratio is required to allow these lots to not be impacted detrimentally by the 100-year floodplain. On lot 1, the applicant is asking for a setback reduction on the southern 25 feet setback to a 10-foot setback. This property line abuts West Road to south, so he's asking just for a 15-foot alleviation on that end. To offset this, the applicant is proposing 7 acres of open space. In that open space, a large diameter gazebo will be located inside, and landscaping along the eastern boundary of the subdivision will act as a buffer in between the Chino Garden subdivision and this proposed subdivision. All amenities on site will be maintained by a community ran homeowners association. So in regards to conformance for the general plan, the property has a general plan land use designation of medium density residential. The applicant is requesting a zone change from AR5 to SR 0.16 with a PAD overlay. The applicant proposes residential development at a density that meets the intent of the medium density residential classification, with the average lot size being 21,796 square feet. Proposed zoning. The general area supports the medium density single family residential development based on the surrounding area's current land use. The developer proposal is to mirror lot size of the development to the east, the Chino Gardens subdivision. This subdivision was originally planned to be 1 acre lots. However, due to lot splits, the subdivision primarily consists now of half-acre single-family lots. Although the applicant is requesting the SR 0.16 zoning, the proposed lots will be no smaller than half-acre in size. The proposed development standards are consistent with the surrounding area. However, the open space and landscape areas provided significantly exceed those of the surrounding developments. Conformance of the preliminary plat. Wesdemar Farms preliminary plat meets all the requirements set forth in section 5.2.3 of the Unified Development Ordinance. The site will have its main access by way of West Road 2 South. The development will be connecting to City of Prescott Water and will be utilizing private septic systems for their wastewater. The Development Services Department and the Public Works Department have completed their initial review of the plat. Approval of the preliminary plat. After approval of the preliminary plat, the project will go through a technical review process with town staff and come back to Planning and Zoning and Council for the final plat approval. Just as a small note here, on the mailed public notice, there was an error on the vicinity map. This is due to a glitch in our GIS system. It mislabeled the West Road 2 South and West Road 2 West Road 2 South and East Road 2 South as West Road 1 East. As soon as staff was made aware of this, they contacted legal, and after review, it was determined that every other aspect of the notifications were correct in regards to the mailer, the physical posting on the property, as well as the posting within the newspaper. Legal confirmed that this town staff has satisfied all other ARS requirements. The vicinity map included in the mailed public notice is a courtesy that the town provides to the public. So in closing here, town staff recommends in regards to the zone change, town staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to town council to approve the rezone of approximately 10.54 acres of real property from AR5 agricultural residential 5 acre minimum zoning district to SR 0.16 PAD single family residential 7,000 square foot minimum lot area zoning district with a planned area development overlay. And then in regards to the preliminary plat item, staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to town council to approve Wesdemar Farms preliminary plat subdividing approximately 10.54 acres into 15 lots with the average lot size of 21,796 square feet developed over a single phase. So that'll conclude our staff presentation. We'll open up to questions and discussion, and I will pull up a clean copy of the preliminary plat for this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Dingy. I'm sure there's questions from the commission. Who would like to start? Mr. McCafferty?
In your packet, and I go back to, well, I guess you don't need to go back, but it says within the staff analysis, it says this project meets the intent of medium density residential designation. What is the definition that you're using for medium density?
So the code is rather vague when it comes to defining the general plan designation of that. There's a specific area where it calls out 2 acres or less, but as far as any other designation.
The general plan is nebulous on defining medium density residential. In fact, every residential area within the town that's designated general on our general plan as medium they're all designated medium density residential. So there's no low density, there's no very low density, it's just all medium density. And that covers all zoning districts from SR0 to AR5.
But they do make reference to the target strategies, number 2, I believe it is, that talks about a transition between those. Am I correct?
But that doesn't.
No, so what I'm asking, the reason why I'm asking, I'm just trying to envision the development plan as a city. So when I look at this, we have commercial.
1 second. Can you general designations?
Yeah, there's with the circles in the red.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we have the red in the commercial, and we understand what that is. Then we go to the B, I'm sorry, what was that called? Or Chino Garden?
Yeah, Chino Gardens.
Chino Garden. Okay, I understand they have SR1, but did I hear you say that those are not, they're not half-acre lots? Because I thought earlier you said.
No, they are half
They are
acre.
half acre, so there are 2 lots contained within the subdivision right here and here that still hold their.
Okay, but those lots are going to be bigger than the proposed project to the west. This project.
No, so this project, the proposed project, will hold 0.5 half acre lots in size.
Okay. Okay,
Correct.
gotcha. I understand that.
Is that normal for SR1 lots to be able to be split into half-acre lots?
It's not normal.
How does that happen?
Your guess is as good as mine. SR
Go back 60 years. The original plat was for 15 1-acre lots. And over the last 60 years, they've gone to half-acre somehow. Probably people just saying, oh, I've got this space, and nobody cleared the zoning on it.
It is considered non-conforming at this point.
The smallest lot size in an SR1 is 1 acre. So anything smaller than that is non-conforming.
And there was another subdivision close by that was also half-acre lots.
I think it's south and east.
Southwest Parkside Village, they are.
Kind of kitty corner over.
So at Kitty Corner, they are SR1, so they do hold 1 acre
Where the
lots.
arrow is at.
Yes, right here. So they are 1 acre in size, and they are conforming to their zoning standards.
They are non-conforming.
No, they are conforming.
Or they are conforming.
They are conforming.
It's
And so
southeast.
Yeah, then it's Parkside down here southeast. They
That's
are
the non-conforming.
no, they're still conforming as well.
I thought there was 2.
No, there is only one non-conforming, and that is the Chino Gardens.
And then farther west, it's SR2 or 5?
In reference to here,
No, west.
West.
They are
It's
five.
buried.
It's varied. So we have.
So this is the general plan map.
So this is the zoning here, is what they're.
There we go. Okay, so now, look, I want to go back to the most northern pop. I think you said the top 2, maybe 3 properties in this proposal on the northern end needed some deviation from the zoning because of the 100-year floodplain. Am I correct?
There you go.
Did I hear that right?
Yep.
So can you elaborate a little bit more exactly what it is they're asking? I don't quite gather exactly what they're asking for.
All right. So the only things that they're asking alleviation for are the setback on Road 2 South to be 10 feet instead of 25 feet.
Okay.
The reason they're asking for the lots to be longer, so they don't need a 3-to-1 ratio. They're more like a 4-to-1 ratio. And the reason for that is that floodplain cuts through some of that. So by allowing the longer lots through the, they would have a bigger building site and still be able to meet setbacks.
But they also meet the half-acre requirement.
Yeah, all the lots are half-acre minimum.
They're just shaped differently.
They're just a little bit longer than the length to width ratio is different.
And then the last question I have is kind of geared for you, Frank, in a way, because this is touchy, but the most northern, so I guess that would be lot 13, 14, and 15. I'm not too worried about the open space, but 13, 14, 15. Would we regulate any mitigation that would impact water flow to downstream residents, or actually upstream as well if it backflows? Would we ensure regulations? Because I know how this plays out sometimes.
Right. The drainage strategy we would look at in technical review if it gets to that. Right now is the. We look at the 15 acres or whatever the acre. 10.5 acres is one. Historic levels and places, so they can maneuver within the at the same time. Can't back it up on the guy upstream of them. So that's what you look at as a whole. And then once those, if John Smith buys lot 15, and I imagine they would do similar to Molly Ray, where they would set a building at a certain elevation. And if he wanted to deviate from that, he would have to hire an engineer to in and out of lot 15 by itself doesn't deviate.
And
Because once you divide it, those property lines change, and that's where the legal requirements change.
Right, but it wouldn't, they would have to devise whatever system they would in order to ensure that it wouldn't impact Chino Gardens
Correct.
or even further north.
Right. They can't detrimentally impact the surrounding properties, either positively or negatively.
Any other questions from the commission?
Then how are you gonna do that? Are you strictly by elevation of the pad? Right, you think?
That's for their licensed engineer to determine and us to review.
And he has to present that prior to your technical review?
That is the technical review
Okay.
prior to final plat.
On the staff report, page 2, Will describes there's going to be or possibly a sit-down meeting between the developer and with the town to discuss options. Has that taken place? And if so, what are those options?
So that was primarily, I'm assuming that was in regards to the neighborhood meeting.
Correct.
Correct. So the sit-down meeting was essentially to discuss the potential ability of being able to have agricultural purposes within the single-family zoning of 0.16. So after discussed with the developer as well as with town staff, unfortunately, that is not something that staff can, through the zoning district and through the existing zoning code, would not be something that's permissible in the 0.16 zoning district.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, that means that no livestock will
Correct.
be allowed in the subdivision.
That is correct.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission have any comments or questions at this point?
What's on Damon Loop? Is there livestock allowable in there?
Currently, right now, so with their non-conforming status, they do have the ability to do that. Legality with the code, though, I would kind of leave that open to Josh as far as how we interpret on non-conforming lot sizes with the ability to hold entitlements for that zone.
We're not allowed to that exacerbates a non-conforming situation, whether it's use or zoning. So those properties, if they currently have livestock or whatnot, then they would probably be grandfathered in. We wouldn't go after them for that. But any new livestock or fowl or horses or anything, because they have half an acre, then they're not conforming, and we are not allowed by our code to enlarge or expand non-conforming uses.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, if you'll just hold on, there'll be a public part of the meeting here. You'll be the first one. Any other questions at this point from Commissioner Meadors?
The cul-de-sac at the end of the street that he's putting in, is that large enough to encompass a school bus to turn around?
I'm gonna let the town engineer,
Sure.
Mr. Marbury, answer that one.
Right now,
It should be, and we will also have that reviewed for school buses and fire trucks as well. So fire department will be able to comment on this as well through the process.
And just to clarify, the process of any subdivision, all of those requirements will be reviewed first by the civil engineer that designs it. He knows the requirements for those items. And then also town staff, that's part of their job, is to catch stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of oversight that goes into that when they do any subdivision, not just this one here. We've got a good relationship with the fire department and the school district as far as turning radiuses. I know in past zoning issues we've basically required that those folks be happy before anything goes forward.
And it's going to remain single ingress and egress, just the one road in and out?
I did have one more follow-up question. How far away are we from sewer, Frank, from this? I heard Prescott Water will service these properties. We don't have sewage in the nearby area?
The closest we have sewer probably is at 1 South and Highway 89 on the other side. So you're talking at least $250,000 just across the highway. Not to mention running the half a mile or so south.
So,
And that's if you can get right away to do that.
so right now, how remote is the opportunity for sewer in that area?
About as remote as you're going to get.
Okay.
About as remote as one east getting paved soon.
Yeah.
Right.
Commissioner Switzer.
Apologize, I got my packet a little late, so I thought I remember reading on the west side of the property about a wall or something. What's planned for the west side of the property along the ingress egress road?
So it's along the eastern property line here.
Yeah, eastern.
Eastern. So at the neighborhood meeting, it was the possibility was discussed. Ultimately, right now, the developer is not tied down one way or another. There were many members of the community, specifically in the Chino Gardens, that were pro, and then there were several that were against the wall. So it's ultimately going to be up to the developer. The only other amenity that they're going to be providing there is going to be a landscape buffer,
Which would meet all of the town requirements.
So by town code, there is no requirement for an interior local street landscaping. So this is an additional amenity that the developer is providing.
Okay.
Individual lot purchasers going to be required to put in their own septic system, or is the developer helping on that at all?
I will defer that to the developer. I'm unsure.
We'll give,
Okay.
we'll give you an opportunity in just a little bit so everybody can hear it. All right, so any other questions from the commission? All right. So I'm going to open up the public portion of this meeting. We're going to have a limit of 3 minutes per speaker. If I choose to let you go on more than that, that will be my decision. We've been in some of these contentious meetings before, and we will all remain grown up, respectful, have lots of decorum. If I feel somebody is, then I'm going to ask them to step down from the podium, and they will not be allowed to speak again. I hope I don't go there. I want all of us to have our say. As long as I've been the chair of this commission, I've tried to give everybody an opportunity to speak and get their say out there. If somebody said it 3 times before you, what you don't like, if you would just say when you get up there, I agree with what everybody said, that will help speed things along. I may let you go down that road a tiny bit before I say, please, we've got the message. But by and large, I'm going to give everybody a chance to have their say at this part of the meeting. And then once you've asked your questions or your comments, I'm going to try to keep a record, and I hope some of the other commissioners do the same. We'll have the town staff and the developer come up and make some comments to that. I would appreciate it if there wasn't a bunch of give and take between the audience and the commission or the person speaking at the podium. That sort of leads to disorder really quick, which is not good. So at this point, I'm going to open that part of the meeting up. And ma'am, you had your hand up, so would you please step up and just say your name? And
Chuck, can the people in the lobby out there hear and see everything that's going on? So if one of them wants to speak, they'll throw a rock at the door or something.
it's supposed to be the same information that we have. If somebody out there doesn't agree with that, they can stick their head in there and we'll talk to them.
Got it.
Yes, ma'am, you step up to the podium. That way they can hear you in TV land.
Chair and Commission, I will, once everybody here has been able to speak, I will go out audience area and ask them to come up if anybody else would like to speak. If I can just remind everybody to please state your name and spell it if it's not common for a minute. Thank you.
That's for the minutes, and don't be worried about it, just have at it.
I'm Patricia Bevan, last name is spelled Beaven.
I'm Patricia Bevan, Beaven, and Chino Gardens has a spokesperson that is going to relay most of the information we wanted to share. But I have a declaration of the restrictions from the original 1963 subdividing of Chino Gardens, which does state that even though they were 1 acre lots, it allows for them to be subdivided into ½ an acre. And my major concern and those of the Chino Gardens area is that the way the subdivision is going to be on Westmar Farms will make it the only property in the whole section that is not allowed livestock, which greatly changes the whole atmosphere of that area of Chino.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Did she put those notes that she brought from the 1960 something, were they entered into the record also?
I have copies if anyone would like.
The town clerk, please.
Good evening. My name is Tim Corrade. It's Korade. I basically have about 1,000 foot of frontage sharing with the property on the other side. So I want to thank all of you for listening in earnest to all the things that are coming up here tonight and the issues at hand. Our town has very clearly written mission statement, unlike a lot of others where it's fuzzy and, you know, not that clear. We provide public services to the citizens of Chino Valley, an economic, self-sustaining town that cherishes and preserves its historic rural lifestyle. That's part of it. It's important to have a mission statement because it sort of gives us direction of where we're going to go, where we are now, and in a lot of ways gives us guidelines and signposts so that we're all on the same page, marching in the same direction. The reason I feel strongly against the zoning the way it is now is when I pulled the copy of the ordinance for the 0.16, it explicitly stated the purpose of the district is to allow the regulation, development, and redevelopment of existing 7,000 square foot residential lots. It is not the intention of the town to create any new SR 0.16 zoned property. And that's what was in the documentation that I found with the actual zoning. So in keeping with our mission statement and the zoning as it's stated in there, I would recommend we look at ways to zone it agricultural to hit the points where people want, so livestock can be had if they want. So thank you very much for listening to this. Everybody have a very good evening.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Vince Albert. Live on Damien Loop. Just wanted to address a couple of the technical things that are going on about, okay, the first is, okay, maintain the agricultural designation for the area. It's a way, that's why everybody moved there and would love to see that maintained and not set a precedent to use the 0.16 zoning, which could open up all sorts of other uses in that area on other parcels for it to be employed. Okay, for the parcel rezoning in question here, to satisfy the lot size ratio thing, an alleviation, variance was granted, and the density requirements for the medium family density. The only way that was met was by giving the variance for the lot size ratios. So there's a couple things working together just to kind of change the rules. The floodplain was discussed as how it relates to affecting the last three lots, 13, 14, 15, or whatever. And it said it was said that the proposed plat was put forth because it's less affected by the floodplain issue. Well, an SR1 zoning with a ½ acre pad would not be affected any more, obviously, than the 1.6 with the 15 lots, 0.16. So I don't really see where that came into play. The 1 acre lot, it would also eliminate the variation for the lot size ratio, length to width. And, above all, the SR1 zoning would maintain the agricultural designation. That and the setting of a precedent to use another zoning in that area that could in the future be used for less desirable developments. That all seems kind of problematic to me and all the other people who signed the little petition that was distributed to y'all tonight. That's about all I had time to pull together, so thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Monty Lira, Lira, and I owned 10 acres just north, well, it corners this, so it'd be the northeast corner, I'm sorry, the northwest corner of this property. Basically, we've been in a 5 acre zoning for, I've been there for 20 years now. I don't really understand the SR 0.16. If they were looking at potentially 2 acre, I could see it. I think that would fit the area. Or at the lowest, 1 acre type minimum. I think because of the way the lots are being split, it's not really going to, I think it's going to make problems with sewage, potentially. I think you're going to have some problems on 13, 14, and 15 as far as creating a damming effect if people build homes in there. Especially with the roundabout at the end. I think basically half of that waterway through there is basically going to be compromised. Again, I've lived in the area for about 20 years now, and I personally think there's a lot of homes and neighbors in the neighborhood that have 5 acres still. And I know there's 3 or 4 of them out front that probably would like to come back and speak. Again, I don't know if that's on a delayed time, but I'll try to get word to them when I finish here. So
we're going to invite them to come in to speak as soon as everybody in here's had their say.
Okay. And but that's mainly the thing. I'm kind of, I kind of feel like the last gentleman, basically 1 acre would be a questionable deal even at 1 acre. But I realize, certain deals, I know that financially a lot of the 1 acre parcels now are selling for around 60,000 around town. I don't know financially, where it's feasible and what the developer is bringing into this, if he's paving roads. And again, you mentioned sewer earlier, but it doesn't sound like that's going to work. And it makes me wonder, down to this density and the way you guys are describing it as 0.16 acre. If nothing else is stated as a half acre, that's what it is. Because I think that does open the door potentially to people thinking they can split it down to 0.16 acres. And I'm not using my back half. So why not sell it and put another road in someday? So anyway, that's what I got to say.
Thank you, sir. I saw that lady first. I'll get to you guys in a minute.
My name is Michelle Belberud, Belberud. And this is just a really quick, simple thing. This gentleman here, Will, that's all I know, had said that the majority of the people stated that they wanted a wall along that back end. And as we are agricultural and rural, I only know of 2 families that had said that they wanted that. The rest of us are saying, no, we don't want a wall. So we don't want a wall for this area. We want a wall elsewhere, but we don't want it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Andrea Sexton, Sexton. I live just south on the other side of Road 2 from this property, and I really want to ditto what's been previously said, because I think this is a precedent-setting decision for the town. You know, the other subdivisions that were cited that are residential with no agriculture. Some people call that progress. People like me who love and value the livestock and the rural feel and the solitude and the privacy don't consider that progress. So we're really talking about values as much as anything else. But, you know, I have 2.5 acres, and the people on the south side of the road, it's 2.5 to 5 acres, and Tim and Dawn have 10 acres, and they have livestock, and that's primarily with no intention whatsoever. So, I mean, there's two big issues here. One is the size of the parcels, and the other is the agricultural issue. And our developer has said that, you know, his proposal is compatible with the size of Chino Gardens, and I think that that's a sort of a misrepresentation, because the Damien Loop properties are on two sides of a road, and his parcels would go south to north. Plus, he's only building on the east side of those properties because of the floodplain, which makes the density question even more apparent aesthetically. So to compare Chino Gardens with this new development, you really can only fairly count the number of houses on Damien Loop from the south side to the north side. And there are 7 to 9 houses on both sides of Damien Loop, both east and west, which basically comes down to, you know, retaining the agricultural feel, retaining the rural feel. The way this project is presented, all the houses are on the east side of the new development, looking directly into the livestock-ridden, you know, chickens, roosters, donkeys, cow, whatever people have over there. And if I were a homeowner buying a beautiful home, these are beautiful homes. I would be upset by that. But that's an individual choice. But I'm just saying that livestock, animals are, for me, like kids. I mean, to see somebody tamper with that is really an affront to a very deeply held value, and part of the reason why I love living in Chino. And I would really hate to see any precedent for removing that honor to own my beloved animals. So I think 15 homes along one single road with one single access just seems like it almost doubles the density of ChinoValley, even though the lot sizes may be the same. Aesthetically, value-wise, it really feels like, oh my gosh, what's happened to our neighborhood? There are some other concerns, and I presented a letter to each of you that was kind of a summary of what happened in our town meeting last week. And there were some other concerns that I know aren't the developers to resolve. They're more town of ChinoValley concerns, but I put them in the letter because I think they are very important considerations. One is the road maintenance on Road 2 South itself. You know, anybody that...
Ma'am, I know your time is up, but we have your letter and you've expressed your concerns, and the road maintenance was on there. So if we could be okay with that, that would be helpful.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. I saw that guy, then you, and then you, and then the lady in the front.
My name's John Gilman, Gillman. One quick concern out of the many that you're going to probably hear is Road 2 South at the front of the proposed housing is required or needs to have a reset to where a school bus or cars going in to the property can get off of 2, which is almost disastrous anyways, because if 2 cars or trucks go opposite each other on 2, they have to pull over to the drainage ditch to keep from hitting each other. So my thought is that when the builder builds this, or the city or the town, a recess into the front of the building area where the houses are, where a school bus can pull in safely and not be on 2 South, and allow children to egress, get into the bus, and not be concerned about cars coming in and out. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I call, sir, you've already been up once. Let's let everybody else get a shot. And if I can, I may come back to you. Yes, sir. 30 seconds.
Good evening. My name is Chris Lowman, Lowman. I've been a resident of Yavapai County for 13 years, 10 of that in Chino Valley. Our developer here, he talked about his proposal being comparable to the area. Here's what's comparable. It's in Chino. It has City of Prescott water and on septic tanks. That's where the comparison ends. The lot size layout. We have nice square lots where our homes are spread out. He has skinny lots where the homes are stacked on top of each other. The housing density he has proposed is way too high. You're looking at 2 homes crammed on top of each other within what the footprint of where our homes are. The land use, due to the floodplain we've looked at, the terrain, 3 to 4 acres of his land is not developable. 2 of those homes are in a floodplain. What you're really looking at once you take out the road he's got to build, those lot sizes are really about 30-acre lot sizes. The homes he's proposing, 1,800 to 2,200 square foot homes. Good for those homeowners. The average home size in Chino Gardens is 1,400 square feet. His price point is $500,000. Right now, homes in Chino Garden are selling at the high end $275,000. Pretty sure everybody in this room would guarantee that's too high for Chino Gardens. That's not comparable. He has an HOA proposed. Not agriculture. We're not an HOA. We're country folks who like being in the country. What he's proposing is changing the face of Chino Valley. Everything south of Center Street is 5 and 10 acre lots, other than a couple of exceptions. It's all rural agriculture. These developers, they're making money. Good for them. Good for America to make money. He's changing the face of Chino Valley from a rural ag-based society to high density residential. There's nothing more than a bedroom community for Prescott. Chino Valley is an ag town. That's what we started at. That's what we need to maintain as our society is an ag-based society where we love our cows, we love our chickens. My daughter loves chickens. She wants to go to U of A and be a large animal vet to work on the local ranches because the ranches don't have enough large animal vets. She got that love starting with her chickens, playing with grandma's horses. Now we're changing that. We're changing what Chino Valley is from a ag-based society to high-density residential. Safety, we've mentioned that, too south. Too many cars. The road they have proposed is in a terrible location. You stand there where that road's coming out, you can't see out the backside of that road where cars are coming. We have hard enough time seeing at West Damien Loop pulling out. Where he has that proposed, people speed like crazy down too south. It's going to cause accidents. It's a huge safety concern. So I would just implore you, keep Chino, keep our ag-based society, keep what we have there for residential ag with what's already stated there and what the feel of all of South Chino is. Thank you.
Thank you. Has everybody in here had an opportunity to speak, ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Dawn Corade, Tim's wife, Korade. And I agree with all the rural things. This has to do with Road 2 South. We've already seen, and the local community has expressed every time we talk about which road we live on, how much traffic there is. The chances are that it's going to be widened. Eventually, as the town progresses, that road, if we allow that waiver at the front, so there's a smaller setback, I'm afraid that that's going to run into a serious financial problem for the town later. We won't be able to widen that road if we don't have enough setback to widen that road when it needs to happen later on. We came from a small town in New Hampshire, less than 5,000 people there, and we had some of the same issues. And as it was mentioned earlier by someone on the commission, being concerned about possible legal issues with the floodplain and mitigating that and who's going to have to enforce that. So I hope the town will look at that very carefully and look into the future with that, because I think it would be a very bad idea to allow things too close to that road. We just built a new fence along the front of our property, and we put it more than 10 feet back from the road, knowing that eventually that's going to widen out. We don't want to have to redo everything or have the town pay to have everything redone because we put the fence close. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ma'am.
I'm Carol Farrow, F-A-O-R-O. We live on 2 South, just off Damien Loop. We've been there 44 years. We moved to the area for a rural atmosphere. And what he's proposing, I agree thoroughly with that man over there. That density is crazy. 2 houses for 1 lot of Chino Gardens. I mean, that's just, and long ago, I was called to court to be a witness for somebody on Chino Gardens because people complained about their roosters. Well, the property he's proposing without livestock, those people are going to be complaining about the people in Chino Gardens. I mean, we moved there to have agriculture and, you know, animals and things, and intend to continue doing that. So I hope you really consider that density. It really bothers me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
My name is Donna Armstrong. I've been a resident in Chino Valley for about 12, 13 years. I have fought this fight in Los Angeles and Las Vegas. We are turning Chino into LA by allowing this. Doing away with horse property is just wrong. Don't do it, please.
Thank you. If you'll ask those folks to come in one at a time, that'd be great. So anybody want to volunteer to go out as the other person comes in? Come on in, ma'am.
Where am I going, right there?
Yeah, you're the first one in, so we'll let you talk first. How's that?
My name is Lisa Corbell. We live to the west of this property. I agree with everything that everybody has said. And I had a friend that was trying to split a 7-acre piece on 2 South. She's zoned Ag 5. She wanted to split off 1 acre, and she didn't get this far, but she was told by the town, no, she couldn't do it. And so they stopped. And so I find it odd that you're considering 0.16 acres. She wanted to split off 1 acre. So I would just like to say that you all were elected to represent the people of Chino Valley. The developer is here to make money and move on. So you really need to listen to these people. These are your people. This is your town that you're representing. Do not ignore them and let these developers bully their way into that density. You are Chino Valley's representatives, and these people are counting on you, and you are hearing what they're saying. So please do not ignore them.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the zoning commission members volunteer. We don't receive anything for our services to the town.
So you represent these folks.
We do de facto represent you guys,
It may
but
be an economic thing for the developer, but these are your people.
thank you.
If I may address the lot split question, when to split their lots, they are in the past, it would have been required. If she was told no, then it would have required a subdivision or as well.
Right, so we don't always know the backstory. Yes, sir. Yep, step right up. We're gonna watch you walk up there every step you take.
I'm Greg Patterson. I live on kind of the northwest corner. We're just building there now. And I've been in this town right at 60 years. Just a short timer, but I'm right beside Monty and his wife. And we went in to try to get our place split in half. Went into the city, they said you can't do it. It was on 5 acres. We walked out. So this makes no sense to me. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else out there wanted to speak? All right. 30 seconds, you promised.
No, I used to work in the architectural field, but I understand the SR1 and the 016 zoning. They have different street frontage requirements, 100 foot versus 50. And so I know that the 50, the only way you could get these narrow lot sizes was by the 016. And perhaps some other configuration for the parcels in that 10 acres in a street location. Maybe that would be an option, because we were told last time here that the SR1 with a half-acre overlay was also a possibility. That would retain the agricultural. That's what the guy here said. But okay, if that's not possible, never mind there. But I just know these skinny lots came into play because of the 100-foot frontage required by the SR1.
Actually, the half-acre came into play because we have no zoning districts that are in between SR 0.16 and SR1.
Let me let you go there in a minute.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, another mechanism to do it though would have been the SR1 with a half-acre pad, is what we were told.
All right.
Okay.
We'll bring that into the deal here. Everybody's had their chance. I'm closing the public portion of this meeting, the public comment portion, I should say. And so I'm going to ask town staff to maybe visit some of these items here, the questions that have come up. And I also feel that it would be helpful for town staff to explain the reasoning behind going for the SR 0.61 lot size.
Okay, so some of the questions revolved around density. The density is calculated based on the number of lots within the total number of acres. You have 15 half-acre lots within 10.54 acres. So this gives you a total density of 1.75, approximately 1.6. So the density is it is similar to the density of Chino Gardens. The lots are half acre, just as they are in Chino Gardens. The reason we went with SR 0.16 instead of SR1 is we have no provision in the code to allow for an SR1 property to be split into half acres without rezoning down to SR 0.16. The PAD specifically was to alleviate the lot to width ratio, the length to width ratio of the lots. The right of way, maybe Frank can talk about some of the requirements that would be required on Road 2 South. Current arterial width, 100 feet. Width, did you want to talk about that?
I can. So for arterials, the total right-of-way width is 100 feet. So when you're looking at property development, you look at what we call the half street. So the development on one side of the street is responsible for half of that 100 feet. So you'd be looking at a 50-foot right-of-way dedication. Now, people hear 50 feet and they think, oh, 50 foot of pavement. No, that's not the case. That's the actual right-of-way. For arterials, you'd be looking at, of that 50 feet, it would be pavement. And then there's some curb, gutter, and sidewalks is the way our code's written. This is not me as town engineer saying we should have sidewalks on 2 South. This is saying this is what the code says, and that's an ordinance that council makes. I don't have authority to go against an ordinance that council makes. So that's what the development is for an arterial street there, and that's, I believe, what's in this proposal is to dedicate that 50-foot right-of-way for that ultimate 100-foot section.
So in the questions, it was brought up, I think there was some confusion about property setback as opposed to right-of-way setback. They're shrinking the property setback on the Road 2 South portion of one property, I believe. And that doesn't affect the 50-foot road right-of-way at all. That's on the subdivision itself. So they're only asking to place the house closer to the road than what would normally be allowed as part of the PAD. Am I correct?
That's correct. So the required right-of-way that we need to get full build-out, which is most likely more than what this town will ever need, will be achieved through the dedication during the platting, final plat, and when the improvements are constructed.
And just a little education, anytime a subdivision or zoning change comes before the board, if there's a right-of-way that's required, it's always included as part of the zoning change that the person whose property is involved gives up that road right-of-way according to the town standards. So this person has already been required to do that. He's given up that right-of-way. I think the question was more of a setback requirement for our lot line as opposed to a road right-of-way.
And if I may add, Mr. Chair, for reference, in most right-of-way dedications are somewhere between 0 and 25 feet, depending on the properties. We actually have some roads that are on people's property technically.
I live on one of them. Okay. Will, did you have some comment or you waiting?
I'm just waiting if you guys got questions.
So some of the concerns I heard was about livestock. Going down to the 0.16 zoning alleviates that particular property can have any livestock on it. Does that affect the properties around that in the fact that can those properties still continue or may start to continue to exercise their agricultural zoning rights?
If the commission wanted to add a stipulation on there that that these lots be allowed to have some form of agriculture based on the PAD zoning overlay, that's definitely something that can be added to the zoning, since the PAD overlay technically is the zoning on that property. But that would be up to the commission to make that.
So in hearing that opportunity, can we stipulate that anything, cattle, horses, be part of that deal, just like the properties around it?
If you wanted to add that stipulation, I would say that you should add the language that it be similar to what is allowed in the SR1.
Okay.
I have a question about that though.
Good.
What is it?
Doesn't an HOA trump that though?
We don't.
I saw the presentation where it was going to be governed by an HOA.
Yeah, well, the HOA is civil only, so the property owners who buy those properties would be required to sign the HOA agreement and then would be required to abide by that. It would be enforced by the HOA board. We don't care about the HOA as a town. We don't do any enforcement of the HOA rules.
But realistically, it's a mute issue that by adding it as an amendment to our recommendation before the council, if we know the HOA, or we don't know what the HOA is going to say, but in theory, the HOA
Can override.
can override regardless of what it says.
That's not true. That's not true. So the HOA, while it's civil in nature, the town zoning laws and zoning ordinances, which are adopted by council, trump the HOA laws. So if there's a law in the HOA CC&Rs that states, oh, you can have a junkyard in the back of your yard, you can have trailers and things like that, our zoning ordinance actually trumps that.
No, I understand that. It can't go below the standard, but it can go above the standard.
It can be more restrictive if they
That's what
choose.
we're talking about.
Okay, I misunderstood.
So there's
Okay, so
the
let me
commission
add-
could put something in to say that ag is allowed or livestock, but the HOA could have an HOA that does not allow.
That is correct.
So is there an opportunity in this process to stipulate that the HOA will follow the SR1 zoning requirements?
No, we don't do any enforcement or rules or laws that say anything about an HOA that way.
So would the developer be able to put that in it?
That would be for him.
Okay, he's coming up.
What's the exact language on SR1 for livestock?
The exact language for SR1, there is a limit. To 1 per acre, sheep, goats, fowl, but not feedlots, slaughterhouses, fertilizer yards, or plants. So there's a limit of cattle, horses, and swine, but there's not a limit to sheep, goats, and fowl.
Okay, let me review this here.
You can raise cattle on a half-acre lot? I don't think so.
That seems more cruel to me.
You could put 20 horses on there.
I'm not gonna tell anybody that's doing 4-H that they can't do it. That's just doesn't fit my mindset, so.
In a minute.
You would have to reopen. Ma'am, the hearing was closed to public comment. In order to allow public comment, the commission would have to vote to reopen the public hearing.
And we're gonna stick with the discussion here because this will, if it goes through tonight, come back around and we'll hammer on it some more. I just read, the school bus pullout. Who stipulates the school bus pullout areas, and is this something that is required of a subdivision? Can you educate us a bit?
I don't know if this works, but I'll speak up. That would be through town engineering and then coordination with the school district. Personally, as an engineer, I have mixed feelings about pulling a school bus off a moving traffic road of 1 lane and then having them try and get back into traffic. That creates its own issues. Sometimes it's better just to go ahead and take the lane with the stop bar when you've got a school bus where traffic's required to stop anyway. So from a safety aspect, I'd almost rather the school bus be out in the middle of the road and as visible as possible and be stopped so that all traffic stops. As far as the turning radius of 45 feet, that is the outside turning radius of a school bus and a fire truck. So that's why we set our requirements at 45 feet for cul-de-sacs. But as far as a bus turnout, you hardly see those for school buses. You see them more for public transportation type buses. Like I said, even then, you wind up with a lot of side swipes sometimes for those little bus pullouts. They're a little more complicated than you would think at first blush.
Thank you. Commission has any more questions or comments at this point?
Just a point of clarification. One of the people that spoke from the public had the same last name as one of our commissioners, and is there a relation that needs to be on record for that?
Yeah, that should be stated. It should be on record.
Okay, that's one item. If it's necessary, that's one item. The second item is that one lady handed out a document that said Chino Gardens was allowed to be half acre. Well, that wasn't per the subdivision plat. It is a declaration of restriction that the developer wrote. And so I would like to have that entered in record too.
We can enter that in the record and provide a copy of that along with every other handout that was given out.
I just want to clarify that the comment she made was kind of misleading because it was not done through plat.
Yeah, technically, in order to modify a platted subdivision, you would need to replat it.
Just for another point of clarification, all of the handouts, I would like to make sure all the handouts that we received will be entered into the record tonight.
They'll be entered in the record, and we will make sure that a copy of each is attached to the copy of the that's given to the council member before the council meeting.
Thank you. And as to the identification of the individual that spoke that has the same last name as one of the commissioners, I believe that, if I may do that for you, that it was Mrs. Armstrong, Commissioner Armstrong's wife that spoke, which she certainly has the right as a citizen of this area to do so. And I have been called out at city council meetings as being part of the zoning commission when really all I just wanted to be was Joe's citizen. So it does happen. And yes, we should have that clearly out there.
It happened once before. We cleared the town clerk and asked, I said, do we need to denote that? And she responded, no. So.
Well, I've been told both and been called out on it. So I think
anybody wants to know, yes, that was my wife that spoke.
I just caution.
And actually, I don't know that it has a huge bearing on things except just to keep the rules up, which Commissioner Pasiak is our great dedicated person to those things, much to his credit. Okay, so I guess we've talked this about a bit. If I could, I'd like to bring the developer up. He sat here and listened to everything, and if he would like to comment and maybe answer some questions.
Well, I was available at the.
If you could state your name, just.
Oh, my name is George Rothfuss. I am the owner of Reserve Builders. I am a citizen of the Tri-City area for 56 years, and I live in Chino Valley. So our proposed subdivision is, what we purchased was the old Westamar Farms. For those of you that didn't see it or don't know it, Westamar Farms had fallen into complete disrepair. It was uninhabitable, and I raised all of the buildings on that site. Our intent here is to, if you look at the zoning map that shows this pocket of land, it essentially lies between what.
Will, can you bring that up for him, please?
You talking about the zoning or the general plan one?
Well, I'm not sure till I see it.
That's it.
Not that one. Yeah. So if you look at what the town of Chino has overlaid here, you see a small pocket of property that is sandwiched between what could ultimately be multifamily or light commercial. So my neighbor to the east, while they are perhaps shorter and fatter, they are the same density as the lots that I am proposing. Likewise, we are not seeking a zoning or a rezone to any type of multifamily use, which arguably could happen there, given that location of the property. So I think in comment about the ag, which came up in the neighborhood meeting, all of my children were members of 4-H. They all raised livestock. I understand how that goes. We have not collectively made a decision on whether we would allow livestock there. Today, we do not intend to do that, given the zoning that we are looking for. If the zoning commission were to allow some sort of 1 acre overlay here, I am not standing here today to tell you that I intend those to be mini farms like Chino Gardens. I certainly don't intend to have horses in our front yards there, but there is ample room behind these houses because of the nature and how they lay in there. They're long, that there is ample room there for backyards. And how people choose to use those backyards could be ag-related, but I don't stand here today to say that's what our intention is. Our intention here is not to create mini farms there.
Okay. So you answered a couple of my questions right there. If we, in our zoning, in our PAD requirements stipulated that the properties would all fall under the same jurisdiction as SR1 zoning, meaning some livestock would be available, and your HOA came in later, which you would have the say-so in the HOA covenants and requirements, could override that. And it sounds to me like your intent is that you probably would not set the HOA up to allow some sort of livestock stipulation.
Well, I have not read what is allowed under SR1. I'm not familiar with that. So to answer that question without having read it, I'm not prepared to do that.
Okay, and that's a good answer.
So I grew up in this area. Hell, I used to hunt ducks and quail in Chino Valley. I mean, I understand development. It's what we do for a living. We're not trying to create a bad situation here. We looked at the overlay of the town. We looked at the neighbors to the east. We looked at the floodplain. And I think that we propose a subdivision that makes sense in that area. If we were a mile to the west and we were talking about chopping up a 10-acre parcel or doing something similar to Molly Ray, which is another approved subdivision in Chino, that might come under a little more scrutiny if we were a little farther west. But I think the location of this site, the neighborhood itself, lends to the proposal. So.
Thank you.
This fellow here, I don't know, he raised his hand. I don't know if he can talk or
I
not.
didn't know if we could, are we allowed to ask him?
No,
All right.
Okay.
That's why I tried to document all these questions everybody had so we could talk to them at this point. So does anybody on the commission have questions for the developer at this point? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard lots of discussion, the pros and cons. I did think of something else that might need to be clarified. One gentleman got up and said because of the floodplain and that sort of business that the lots technically don't meet the 0.5 acres because they can't be built on the back end. Could you kind of clarify that a bit?
I will clarify a little bit and then I will turn to Frank and let him clarify it since he's the floodplain coordinator. About the base flood elevation, and at that point I will turn it over to Frank.
Hang on, folks, because this gets a little complicated.
Well, not really. It's pretty much what Josh said. So there's a whole bunch of requirements they can do as far as building in a floodplain. We have a whole section of code written for that. It follows the FEMA guidelines as far as, and there's different types of floodplains versus floodways. But all of that, you're not necessarily prohibited from constructing in a 100-year floodplain, that you just have extra steps you need to go through, certain elevations to look for. The drainage study for this subdivision would call that out, and probably if there's areas of lots, identify the specific pad elevation and location so that it doesn't impede any of the flow. And like I said, that's why I was talking about you can maneuver the water inside the property. So use a subdivision like Molly Ray, for example, that did that. They set building pad locations in a specific location of the lot that can't be changed. And that's what I would foresee in a situation like this, that you would look at those lot locations, but the overall flow of the storm, you can't impede it on coming in. You can't block it up on your neighbor, and you can't release it at a different rate. But there's ways to design around it. And I believe the developer might have a comment on that as well.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, sir. Step up, please.
Can you put back up?
Yeah. So if that were an enlarged picture, what you would see in each of those lots is a building envelope. So you see essentially two rectangles. You see a rectangle that indicates the lot and the property lines. And you also see a smaller rectangle that indicates the building envelope. So the building envelope is the area that is intended to hold the residential dwelling. And as this development goes to the north, you'll see that those building envelopes shrink in size due to the 100-year floodway that comes through there. So the 100-year floodway, to clarify that, that is not a raging river. That is a sheet flow. At some point in 100 years, it might reach 2 feet. So what happens at the north end of that subdivision, and Frank, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the building pad on lots 15, specifically 15, perhaps a portion of 14, those would be a raised building pad that would hold the house, hold the single family residence. Water would come into the subdivision, it would go around the building pad, and it would leave the subdivision in the same state that it entered. The open space to the north is specifically there to allow that water to spread out. The backyards of all of those lots that have shortened building envelopes are specifically designed that way to allow that sheet flow to come onto the property and leave as it came on. And a portion of the cul-de-sac there is also a low water crossing. So a portion of that water would actually flow across that cul-de-sac in the event of this 100-year event. I hope that might clarify for you a little bit more.
Thank you. Having built in a floodway on a commercial project, there's a lot involved in it, and those elevations are strictly monitored by FEMA. They'll have to do an elevation certificate. Lots of oversight on that, along with the civil engineering that's involved. Any other questions? Any more? Commissioner Meadors.
So the water's supposed to flow in and flow out at the same rate as prior to construction. On his open space, he's got a spot that he's marking for a 2-foot retention basin. Is that not going to impede the flow and hold it?
That will be looked at the time of the design too, to make sure they satisfy all those requirements.
And if I may add to that, the preliminary plat is just a conceptual drawing. Those lines may change depending on what the full drainage study finds.
The detention basin's intent is to capture the water and release it at a certain rate. It doesn't hold it. It just meters it so that it goes out at the historic rate of the property.
Right.
That's its purpose.
If I may, the detention is, like you said, to retain or anywhere. So detention and retention are actually two different things, just to help clarify.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, so we have before us a request to change the zoning. We've gone through the reasoning behind going to the 0.6 zoning. because there isn't really any other opportunity for the town staff to offer anything else. Something that I hope we all take away from this tonight is that we need to revisit that as soon as possible to create some different zoning requirements, maybe 0.75 and 0.50 zonings.
Yeah, we are currently in the process of rewriting the UDO, and when we get to section 3, which includes the zoning districts, we can address it then.
Yeah, because basically your guys' hands are handcuffed here with the zoning. There was discussion that we could place some sort of livestock provision in our recommendations to town council to keep the SR1 zoning opportunities for agriculture in place. The lot size has been talked about. While it doesn't look the same as the neighbors to the east, it's basically the same square footage. As far as development in Chino Valley is already a bedroom community for Prescott. It's very difficult to make a living in Chino Valley on agriculture or any other business, and I applaud anybody that's got a successful business here. There's lots of open land. This is more of a transition area, I think. And so there's a good opportunity here for some progress forward. What I would like to do now is open this up for a motion, one way or the other.
I guess it's me.
It was a long read.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend Planning and Zoning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to Town Council to approve the rezoning of approximately 10.54 acres of real property from the AR5 agricultural residential 5-acre minimum zoning district to SR 0.16 PAD single family residential 7,000 square foot minimum lot area zoning district with a planned development overlay zoning district with a stipulation that livestock be permitted as it is described in SR1 zoning, and that cannot be modified by any HOA that is empowered by this subdivision.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Well, is this a time for
We have
discussion?
to have a second before we can talk.
All right, then I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have more discussion?
Yeah, I mean, everything you just read out, everything was right, but I just think it's kind of futile to put in that the very last provision, knowing that it's a civil matter and HOAs or CCNRs can override it.
And we can't force an HOA. We don't have that authority. So maybe we could modify that a bit.
Clarification on that, Josh? Is that something we can put in there or not put in there?
If you, they can still put in the HOA that no livestock be allowed, and then it would become a civil matter because those property owners would come into the town. We would say, well, the PAD rezoning states that they're allowed, and if they put it in there contrary to what they've signed before they purchased the property, then it turns into a civil matter between that property owner and the HOA and the other property owners as well.
Okay, so if we take it out of there, basically, when these folks get ready to sign the papers stipulated by the HOA, that's their empowerment.
That's correct. If you put stipulation in there, you can just add the stipulation without clarifying that it supersedes the HOA because it already does. So you can put that stipulation there as part of the PAD rezoning, and then whether the developer chooses to have that in their HOA or not, or to prohibit animals, that is up to them. And then any property owner that purchases those property would be required to sign that agreement, the HOA agreement, before they purchase the property. So it would be a buyer beware situation.
Okay, all right, and then I am certainly amenable to removing.
If I can interrupt for just a moment. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. So we'll need a vote on that, and then we may need to redo a motion based on the vote.
You could amend the motion and request a second to that, and then it would be the amended motion. Or you could ask for a vote, and a vote of nay on that would kill that motion, and then you can make another motion. So
without it in there.
Right, so it's whichever way you want
I
to
would
go.
prefer to amend the motion, and we've done that in the past.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
make a motion to amend the motion.
Okay. We'll make a motion to amend the motion by deleting the portion that says it cannot be modified by any HOA that is empowered to this subdivision.
Commissioner Pasiak, are you, or McCafferty, are you ready to second that?
I am.
Okay. So we have an amended motion and an amended second. And now discussion concerning the motion. Anybody? No discussion. Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote, and it will be a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner McCafferty,
Yes, it's consistent with the general plan.
Commissioner Pasiak,
Yes.
Commissioner Schweitzer,
No.
Commissioner Metters,
No.
Vice Chair Armstrong,
Yes.
Chair Merritt.
Yes. The motion carries. As a tradition.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Those that voted no, oh, were you going to say that?
Headed that way.
I have to explain. Yeah.
Guy wants my job.
Sorry.
Commissioner Switzer, would you please just state the reasoning that you voted against it, which is certainly your privilege?
I don't like the fact that Chino Gardens is non-conforming to SR1, so I don't think that gives this plan, the free go-ahead. I like the SR1 minimum for this project. Would rather have it that. I don't like that it violates the town code of 3.1 lot ratio size. I don't like that it creates more SR 0.016, which goes against the UDO statement. I don't like the 2 lots in the flood zone, and I don't like the livestock issue.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Meadors?
I second.
Okay, so your comments, would you just please say you agree with the comments?
I agree with his comments.
That has to go on the record.
I agree with his comments. Issue and density, the SR1
So
zoning.
the council will know why.
Gives them direction.
Yeah, using a non-conforming zoning as as an existing issue to go on with the same zoning, I don't agree with.
Thank you. Okay, so we're done with item 6A. Moving forward to item 6B. Request for approval of Wedsmar Farms preliminary plat to subdivide approximately 10.54 acres into 15 lots developed over phase 1.
Staff handled both A and B in our staff report, and the public hearing addressed both A and B. So if you want to open it back up to public comment again for just the preliminary plat, or if you've had sufficient comment and you want to make a motion, that would be up to you.
So unless the commission disagrees, I think everybody that's here tonight's had a good opportunity to state their issues with it. The preliminary plat is just that. It's completely open to be changed by technical review, but they need to start somewhere. So unless the commission has issue, I would like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, Chair. I recommend the Planning and Zoning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to Town Council to approve Westmar Farms preliminary plat subdividing approximately 10.54 acres into 15 lots with an average lot size of 21,796 square feet developed over one phase.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments from the commission?
Would this be the place to put in SR1 rather than 0.16 as Bob came out with?
There's no. So SR1 has a specific minimum lot size, and that cannot go under 1 acre. So the only option for this PAD is SR 0.16 because the code does not have an SR 5 or anything like that.
Okay.
Not yet. Eventually we will.
Yeah.
If I may make one comment before we vote. I know that there's a perception that this is kicking open a door for a whole bunch of backdoor enterprises to come into this, but with the PAD overlay, and the fact that we don't meet the utility requirements to have these other stuff, we don't have both city water and city sewer involved, that possibility is extraordinarily small, if not completely remote. And it would come back before the commission if they did decide to do that. And I'm pretty sure that this particular commission would not allow it to go forward. The 0.06 zoning is the lever that we have to work with tonight, and hopefully town staff will kick it in high gear to get us more opportunities.
If I may add too, half acre is the lowest lot size that this would be allowed to go anyway by both our town code as well as the Arizona Administrative Code because of the lack of one or more utilities. So since they are able to get water through Prescott and they have to go septic, they're allowed to go half acre. By state statute, you cannot go lower than that. Did you want to add to that?
Little clarification. The state statute does not have the half acre minimum requirement for septic. It's purely a function of setbacks as far as state goes, but there is a town ordinance that no lot shall be constructed with septic smaller than 1/2 acre. That any lot smaller than 1/2 acre must be on a sewer system.
Yes, make that clear, because then everybody's gonna say, well, look at all the subdivisions we have, but they're all on sewer. So, anybody have any other comments? Again, I would like this to be a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Welker,
Yes.
Commissioner McCafferty,
Yes.
Commissioner Pasiak,
Yes.
Commissioner Schweitzer,
No.
Commissioner Metters,
No.
Vice Chair Armstrong,
Yes.
and Chair Merritt.
Yes. And not at the risk of beating a dead horse to death, your comments would be the same for your reasoning for voting no.
Same reasoning.
Okay, we'll let that horse die quietly. All right, so items 6A and 6B are done. We're moving forward to item 7A. And by the way, folks in the public, I really appreciate your courtesy and your politeness, and you're acting as responsible adults. That's how we all should be, and I'm thankful that you folks did that tonight. Thank you very much. So we're moving forward to item 7, non-public action hearing, or hearing action item. 7A is a text amendment to section 4.21 sign regulations to amend off-site commercial signage. Let's beat our head on the wall with this one.
All right. Of course.
I think there's a perception issue with the 0.16.
Yes.
Just
The UDO needs to change.
And that's a good one.
What else I brought? Chino garden.
If you want this.
You got a chance to leave, take it. We don't know what kind of crowd you'll find outside when you get there.
0.16. It should be the same as
Like a chicken.
well, yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's within the community core area.
They should have gone through the
Right.
proper channel.
All right, we'll give her hell.
All right. I'll do my best. So, address the off-site commercial signage issue within the town of Chino Valley. Currently under town code, all off-site signage is prohibited. After receiving multiple complaints and requests for this type of signage from local businesses. Town council has directed staff to draft a text amendment following the February 18th, 2020 study session. So I'm going to open this up to the commission if we want to go through line by line of the proposed language, or if we just want to discuss questions, comments. I'll leave it up to you how we want to kind of proceed here.
So I'm going to ask the commission, has everybody had a chance to read the wordage in this text amendment? Yes. So the answer is yes, that we've all read it. Now the next question is, would we like to go through it again to?
Well, can I give a little history first?
That would be good.
So we received several complaints from the community back in January, maybe December.
Maybe even earlier.
October. Oh, right. That's when I received the complaints,
Yeah.
not necessarily when other people received the complaints. Thanks for the clarification. Given council direction, we prepared language. We took that language to a study session in February, and then the world went to
Yep.
Yeah. We had meant to bring this to you back in March or April at the latest, and we're into July now. So this language has been modified a little bit by legal counsel to make it read more legalese, I guess. But the majority of the concepts are the same. I will add that we have not been able to find any community within the state of Arizona that allows off-site signage at all. So by adopting this, we would be setting a precedent within the state. So review it. We think that it covers all the bases and can be handled and enforced properly. But I'll turn it over to Will and allow him to discuss that with you.
Could you possibly just give us a really quick overview of all the, hit the high points, so to speak?
Sure. So technically access their property or their business off of 89, but might not necessarily have the frontage on the roadway. Specifically, typically as a result of a lot split through the creation of an easement, does not grant these is the ability to place a sign on frontage with the highway that's visible. So this is essentially the workaround for that staff has come up with legal. Typically, we're going to be requiring a license agreement in between a property owner who wants to place their sign on the frontage and then the property in which the sign is going to be placed. So this is going to be a written, signed, notarized agreement between the two property owners. This will not be affected by the sale of the property. If the property changes hands, that the sign is located on, those rights would still be enacted, still be held. It's not going to be subject to ownership. Essentially, and then they also be covered underneath the signage, current signage code of town of Chino Valley. So they're subject to that. It's not in a whole new regulation. They're going to be subject to permanent sign standards, and they will not be allowed to utilize temporary or the auxiliary signage as an offsite signage. I think I kind of covered everything.
Yeah, the only clarification I would make is that this is for any business that has a property line within a quarter mile of 89. So it's not necessarily for businesses that just access off of 89. There are several businesses that
Or like a restaurant, the one north and on the east. This would have an impact on their.
They're approximately a half mile or more off of 89, so this would not impact them at all.
And if I remember,
if you want to increase it from quarter mile or more, that is your prerogative to recommend that to council. Staff is recommending only a quarter mile. The other caveat is that it cannot, the sign, if there is no, they have to place their little sign placard on an existing freestanding sign. If there's not an existing freestanding sign on that property, then one can be constructed and their nameplate can go on there, but the sign itself would be for that shopping center. So the total square footage and everything would be calculated based on that shopping center. The other thing to note, is that no sign, off-site signage is proposed to be allowed on vacant property at all.
Right.
So the property has to be in use as a business before we would allow an off-site sign to be erected or constructed on that property. Also, the property off the highway that's requesting the off-site signage has to have a permanent sign at their site as well.
And that takes away from their percentage.
That's
all
correct.
added into this percentage for their property.
That's correct.
Okay.
What, if any, you might have already thought of all the ones you can think of, but what do you foresee as the loophole issue?
I don't know. We've tied it down pretty well.
Okay.
So obviously there's people out there that spend their time thinking of loopholes in every aspect of life. So I honestly, we've tried to go through.
You've done all the what ifs.
I've spoken to Andrew about that. We've gone through that. I've talked to Will about that. I think this is all encompassing. It's not a sign that's erected in perpetuity. There's a specific time frame that sign is allowed to be up, and it has to be renewed with the property owner. If a property owner sells the property on 89, then that temporary sign cannot be taken down until the lease expires. So we're trying to protect both the off-site business as well as the on-site business. Some on-site businesses may not want to have that lease up all the time. So once that expires, then their sign would have to be removed.
So one question, I'm going to have two, but to start with, the business that is going to have the sign placed on their property, does that sign take away from their allowed signage?
It should not take away from the square footage of the signage on which it's located. If it's worded like that, we should.
I don't know that it is. I'm asking that question.
The way I read it is that it reduces the square footage allowed on the site that's off-site.
That's what I heard, but I wanted to make sure that I don't think it's in the best interest of the business that's going to allow the sign to be penalized by having their sign square footage reduced.
I actually don't think you'd ever get a property owner to sign a lease if it restricts their square footage.
Right. And, but again, going back to somebody trying to drive a nail in it, just making sure. The other thing is the quarter-mile thing to me seems kind of restrictive. I understand the intent, but there are some places that if you didn't live here, you'd never know they existed. That could probably use some additional.
We can make a recommendation to the council that we approve this, this change, but recommend increase it to whatever, half mile.
Well, what I would like to do in asking this question is kind of open it up for a discussion. Does anybody have a hard, fast feeling on it? Is the quarter-mile sufficient? I know you guys have talked it over many times, I'm sure.
The reason the quarter-mile was chosen is I believe that is the outer limits of the commercial multifamily section of the general plan.
That's basically the only reason.
That's the reason we chose to write it that way.
Okay.
This thing's been through the UDO rewrite committee and the council study session.
It hasn't been through the UDO subcommittee. It was taken directly to council study session.
I personally like the quarter mile.
Okay.
I know two businesses I can think of that are going to fall outside of that. One's a restaurant to the east and one's a windmill place to the west. And I'm just thinking, what about them?
If you want to add a provision in there that businesses that are more than a quarter mile come in, obtain a conditional use permit as an alleviation for that, that might be something that we can address.
That might work.
I hate to see the opportunity locked out, but it's also willy-nilly given the whole place opportunity doesn't make sense.
Vineyard as well.
There are just some businesses that could benefit from the off-site signage without getting crazy about it.
I might add here, I might be out of the loop on it. I know at one point town was discussing with ADOT a wayfinding sign program. Does Frank or Josh, do you know if that's dead or?
I haven't heard anything more about that.
Okay.
So I don't, there was some discussion about a wayfinding sign. Do you know more?
I just know ADOT has a lot of restrictions as far as that goes, and you're not allowed to say specific businesses. You could say, for example, you could say college. You couldn't say Yavapai College for the sign that's on the highway. So I don't think that's what the businesses are looking for.
No, I agree. I think.
Well, there was another program that was discussed through Grand Canyon or whatnot.
Oh, those, yeah, those would be more like the signs you see on the interstate. It has a picture of the business and 1/4 mile at the exit. I'm sorry that one was still being discussed, but
that would be an ADOT jurisdiction.
Correct, but I think the town was looking at that, but I think the cost to do the design was, council did not want to proceed. It was somewhere around a $30,000 design cost.
The Economic Services Director presented that wayfaring sign thing to council that night. I think it was $37,000 just to look into it. And
it was like over $100 grand for all the various signs.
Yeah, that was, now that I remember that they killed it because
they killed it right then and there because they want to pay $37,000 just for a concept design, and then
nothing happened with it.
Engineers are expensive.
So
are planners.
Because I'm traditionally have chosen to not make motions, I think my job as a facilitator, and I don't want to make a motion, but I would like to have somebody make a motion that would possibly include the opportunity for a what was that wordage?
The conditional
use permit. Because I don't think it's smart to open it up willy-nilly, but I do think that there are some significant businesses in town that if they wanted to go through the effort to get a conditional use permit, they should have the opportunity for that.
So what would be the phrase that we're looking for? By amending the offsite commercial sign text
and adding in a provision to allow businesses that are greater than 1/4 mile off of 89 to apply for a conditional use permit.
And they would be bound by the same regulations as everybody else.
Well, it would be the same, but since it's a conditional use permit, we could also place conditions on that for landscaping or other additional.
You can tune it to fit the issue.
That's correct. On a case-by-case basis, and if the conditions are not met, then the conditional use permit can be revoked.
Okay, so if somebody would make a recommendation with that included.
I have no idea how to word that. Go ahead, John.
Okay,
I think John.
Before we go, I just want to add in a provision that authorizes businesses beyond 1/4 mile to seek a conditional use permit through appropriate channels.
That would work.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Okay.
I'll discuss it, I think,
Pardon?
with us trying to encourage businesses out at Old Home Manor. All of them would be affected by 1/4 mile.
Right. I just think they need to have the opportunity. Okay, so we have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, where are we at here? 8. Okay, so 7A is done. Discussion items. Do we have any of those?
No, maybe in the future when we have rezonings and things like that, I would just recommend allowing the engineer or the developer a chance to speak before the opposition. Just as we follow Robert's rules of order, technically the applicant should be given a chance to speak after the staff report as part of the public hearing, and then they be given a chance to rebut after the opposition speaks.
Okay, I understand that. I think my intent was to get as many questions lined up as we could.
Oh, I'm just saying in the future, if we could maybe allow the applicant to respond first and then to rebut.
I think
would give
we'll
them.
just make it a point to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for reminding me of my duties because sometimes I forget.
He's going for your job.
You can have it, trust me. Okay, so we're on item 9, public comments, because there is, ma'am, would you like me to read you the public comment portion of the meeting? So if you wanted to, you could get up. All right, we're gonna just say the public has refused to speak.
I will check, make sure nobody's up on.
If there is, send them in here.
I think we ran them all up.
She did.
Thank you, Commissioner Meadors, for slowing me down. Appreciate that.
Just to bring it up, that's Meadors.
At Meadors.
Only reason I know that's because I've known her forever.
Okay, so public comments, call the public, opportunity to speak. There is no public that wants to speak. So we're gonna move forward to item 10.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you for sitting through a interesting meeting.
So are we gonna have a meeting in a couple weeks?
2 weeks?